All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling a huge topic, the U.S. Judiciary. The source material for this explainer says it's an institution in a deep crisis of confidence. So we're going to break down how we got to this point and then walk through a really detailed plan for reform. Okay, let's get into it.
And wow, these numbers, they really tell the story right away. Public trust in the judiciary has just cratered. It went from 54% in 2020, which is, a majority, down to only 30% today. And to put that into perspective, that's not just a free fall in a few years. It's also a whopping 20 points below what's typical for other developed countries.
Think about that. A 24-point drop. The source argues this isn't just some random dip in the polls. No, this cuts right to the heart of the court's legitimacy as what's supposed to be a co-equal branch of government.
So you got to ask, right? How on earth did one of the core pillars of American democracy end up on such shaky ground? Well, to figure that out, the source material says we need to wind the clock all the way back to the very beginning, to how the court system was designed in the first place. And one of the biggest features of that design, the one, is lifetime tenure for federal judges. We always hear about this as this grand, noble principle to protect judicial independence. But here's where it gets really interesting. The source makes the case that it was also a super practical fix for a major problem they had back then. Okay, so picture this. It's the late 18th century. America is brand new, and there is a tiny pool of people who actually know anything about the law. There weren't really any law schools yet, and getting trained over in England was way too expensive for almost everyone. The framers were in a real bind. They had a serious talent shortage. And this number just puts it in perfect focus. Get this. In a major city like New York, there were only about 40 practicing lawyers in 1785. That's it. So the framers needed a powerful incentive to convince the best people from that tiny group to take a federal job, and more importantly, to stay there.
Now, publicly, Alexander Hamilton framed it this way, arguing that life tenure was the best way to make sure judges were independent and fair. And that was absolutely a core principle. But the source contends that this noble idea had a very practical partner. Offering the ironclad security of a job for life was the best deal they could offer to lock down the nation's few, precious legal experts.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today and see how this all connects. Because a solution that was designed for a country with almost no lawyers is now operating in a world that is completely different. The entire context has been flipped upside down.
And what a different world it is. From maybe 40 lawyers in New York City, we now have more than 1.3 million active lawyers in the U.S. That critical talent shortage that was the whole reason for the original design, it's completely gone. So, according to the source, this means the original, practical justification for lifetime tenure just isn't there anymore.
And on top of that, you've got the fact that we're all living a lot longer. So now justices can serve for decades. Look at this, more than a third of a century. A single president's choice can shape the country's laws for an entire generation, which turns every single nomination into this massive, high-stakes political war for ideological control. And, this whole system now makes the United States a real outlier on the world stage. Most other modern democracies have moved on from lifetime jobs for judges. They've opted for things like fixed terms or mandatory retirement ages to make sure there's regular turnover and some form of accountability.
The source material really puts a fine point on this with a specific term, the democratic deficit. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. It's this idea that having officials who aren't elected hold that much power for their entire lives, with no real way to hold them accountable, just doesn't quite fit with modern ideas about democracy.
So, if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? The source doesn't just point out what's broken, it lays out this really detailed 5-pillar blueprint for a total overhaul. A plan designed to bring back trust and accountability without sacrificing independence. All right, Pillar 1 is a wild idea, but it's designed to hit partisanship right where it lives, randomness. The proposal is to grow the Supreme Court to 27 justices. Then, for every single case, a 9-justice panel is chosen completely at random. This makes it impossible to predict or game the system, and it's aimed at forcing rulings to be based on the law, not on which specific judges happen to hear the case. Pillar 2 completely rethinks how judges get picked in the first place.
Instead of the president choosing, nominations would come from other judges. Experienced judges from all over the country would vote on who gets nominated, and their votes would be weighted based on their experience. The whole idea is to elevate expertise and temperament over political connections.
Now, the next big pillar, Pillar 4, takes on lifetime tenure head-on. It proposes a fixed 18-year term for all federal judges. Now, that's long enough to keep them independent, but it also creates this predictable, regular rhythm. A Supreme Court spot opens up every 2 years like clockwork. The goal is to lower the political temperature of every single appointment and stop one person's ideology from being baked into the court for decades.
And the final pillars, 3 and 5, they're a package deal, all about oversight and just pulling back the curtain. Pillar 3 would also randomize the Senate panels that confirm judges, again, to break up the partisan fighting. And Pillar 5 creates a whole new accountability system, an independent counsel to look into ethical complaints, a public database so we can all see their financial disclosures, and mandatory continuing education to make sure judges stay up to date.
So it all comes down to this really powerful question, doesn't it? The source argues that the framers built a system that was practical and smart for their world. So is the most faithful way to honor their ultimate goal, a stable, trusted government, to adapt that system for our world? That's the central question this blueprint for reform asks us all to think about.